my name is John Wilcox, and this is Redeeming the Fathers of America. What if you had to make a decision whereby you could sit back and do nothing in hope of keeping all you had worked for, your family, lands, surrounding forests, cattle and poultry, or you could take a stand against any and all enemies that threaten you and lose it all? What would you do? That is the kind of decision men like Lewis Morris had to make as his family, home, and property lie in the crosshairs of the enemy. Such decisions lay heavy on the heart of many brave men and women of the latter 1700s. So when we study the life and times of various founding fathers, we should understand the need for these men to be forged with the depth of character required to meet the challenge before them. These were not people of shallow conscience or weak constitutions. This is what makes history so fascinating for me. I am able to discover how everyday people can make a remarkable difference because of how the hands of their Creator and those who were used of Him molded and shaped their lives. Noteworthy are those family, friends, educators, and mentors placed in their lives to aid in the process of maturing them into service. Can this be by accident, or is it providence? When we examine the life of Lewis Morris, we find a rich heritage. His choice of a simple lifestyle was offset by the doors that began to open for him to work in service to his fellow man. This is not always the case for those who choose a life of passivity to the strife around them. Such was the case with Lewis Morris, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. Like many of our founding fathers, Lewis's education was one of private tutoring. At the age of 16, he entered Yale College. While attending Yale, he was noted as having acquired the reputation of good scholarship and a strict morality. After college, he returned home to pursue agricultural interests, marry, have 10 children, and establish a handsome estate. With all this to hold his attention, Lewis still had a deep concern regarding the troubles the colonies were facing. It was the threat to his personal holdings and that of his fellow countrymen that caused Morris to shift his once passive position to one of opposition to the rule of the crown. In spite of the potential for grave personal loss to his personal holdings and the interest of his family, he became more intent on serving the interests of his country. This threat caused many a faint-hearted man in the New York legislature to cower, but it seemed to fuel Lewis's strength for the fight. The year was 1774. Congress was convened in New York, and Lewis attended as an observer. Some thought him to be too spirited, bold, and independent to act with the necessary prudence of the situation of the country required. The object of said Congress was not one of war, but of peace, and as history revealed, that goal failed. It was this same spirit that caught the eye of people like George Washington, who embraced Morris's independence, and with support from similar-minded individuals, Lewis was awarded a seat in that body on May 15, 1774. Shortly thereafter, he was placed on a committee of which George Washington was the chairman. Among the many committees that Morris served, he was assigned the responsibility of purchasing muskets and the production of saltpeter for the manufacture of gunpowder. Later that same year, Morris was selected to serve on the Committee of Remonstrance, whose purpose was to compose a petition of strong protest regarding the excessive burden placed upon the colonies and dispatch it to England's House of Commons. The petition eventually made its way to the king, who considered it a dignified letter. In His Majesty's opening remarks to Parliament, he declared that a most daring spirit of resistance and disobedience to the laws unhappily prevailed in the province of Massachusetts and had broken forth in fresh violences of a very criminal nature, and that these proceedings had been countenanced and encouraged in his other colonies. When the king read the remonstrance, he realized that he would lose regardless of his recourse. Here was the dilemma. If the crown did not respond to the blatant disobedience and violences of His Majesty's subjects, then the throne and parliament would suffer greatly. However, in bringing justice upon those disloyal subjects, the result would likely bring about the unification of the colonies for their cause. The king threatened British merchants to cease servicing the colonies, threatened the planters of sugar and other imports, and brought back the once feared Earl of Chatham from a long retirement to diligently apply all of his resources to quell the rebellion. Even with all of the crown's attempts, it only resulted in unifying all of the colonies toward one purpose: independence. It was the winter of 1775 and 1776 when a shift occurred at the New York Convention. The representatives unanimously agreed to sign a Declaration of Independence. As Lewis weighed the consequences of his signature, a cautionary word came from his half-brother Gouverneur Morris, who was a signatory on the Articles of Confederation. To it, Lewis replied, "Damn the consequences, give me the pen." The British expeditiously sent forth a huge naval fleet and thousands of foot soldiers and descended upon New York. As predicted, the British lay waste to Long Island, Westchester County, and many neighboring areas, including more than 1,000 acres of fields, crops, and woodlands. And the Morris great manor house was laid waste. The loss to Lewis Morris and so many other defenders of freedom was devastating. Much of their property was completely destroyed. Some might not think it a worthy consolation, but as Lewis Morris left Congress in 1777, he and his colleagues received the thanks of the Provincial Convention for their long and faithful services rendered to the colony of New York and the said state. This man's service to his country was noteworthy and considerable, but nothing gave him greater peace and joy than managing his property. Morris somehow balanced all of his civic duties against the necessary task of restoring the manor and property to its former glory. In the pursuit of this goal, Morris spent much time studying and implementing agricultural advances such as crop rotation, soil improvement, and seed mutations. He died on his paternal estate in the loving arms of his family in January 1798 at the age of 71 years. Thank you for watching Redeeming the Fathers of America.